Cheers, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I am Dave Brown, and this is the New Populist. Well, the rhetoric between the United States and China is heating up. And up until recently, it has been fairly one-sided, with politicians from the United States attacking China, specifically Donald Trump. But when Trump was doing it, it was more about economics and getting concessions on issues like trade. So he brought up intellectual property. He brought up currency manipulation, things like that, because his intent was about business. It wasn't really about military confrontation. Unfortunately, the other Republicans and Democrats in the United States, when they bring up China, it's about confrontation. And it's getting scary because now we have China finally speaking back, and they are no longer just taking it and being vague in their responses. They are becoming more and more pointed. And I've always referred back to the book by Michael Pillsbury, The 100-Year Marathon, where he talks about China and says that China will bide its time and they won't speak and get tough until they know they're in a position to actually take control. So these last 30 years, China has been building up their economy, their military. And now, with the United States in this proxy war with Ukraine, with the United States saber rattling with Taiwan, they are finally stepping up and going, enough is enough. You guys are talking tough, but hey, we're not your little kid. We're not a little kid anymore. We can fight back. And now we're finally starting to see that. So recently, China had a new defense minister appointed, Li Shangfu. Now, Li Shangfu is actually sanctioned by the U.S. government. And why is this? Well, back in 2017, the U.S. Congress passed a bill saying that people or entities cannot do business with the Russian military and purchase Russian military equipment. So in December of 2018, Li Shangfu was sanctioned by the U.S. government for, as it says here, engaging in significant transactions with persons sanctioned under CAA-TSA, which is that's the acronym for Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. And what's kind of funny about this is that the two leading countries as far as military exports are the United States and Russia. And the United States is the biggest exporter. We have about 40% of the market. And Russia, up until recently, had about 22%. But that is falling because we have this Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act that is aimed at hurting military exports from Russia. And the problem is for China is that their systems are based off of a lot of Soviet technology. So they really don't have a choice but to work with the Russians. And here we have this U.S. law saying if you do business with them, you're sanctioned. Although in this case, China says, we don't care and do whatever you want. Sanction our defense minister. Go ahead. So this defense minister was recently appointed. And there's also a new foreign minister, Qin Kang. I apologize if I mispronounced that. And he recently made some statements that for China were very, very pointed. And this is an article from the Washington Post on March 7th, 2023. And the title is China's Foreign Minister Predicts Impending Clash with United States. And for China to be, again, that precise and that pointed is a new thing. They're usually ambiguous. They stay neutral or diplomatic. And now we're seeing China amp up their own rhetoric. And can you blame them? We look at the Taiwan situation. We look at Ukraine, and China's watching Ukraine and seeing Taiwan as the same thing, a way for the United States to have a proxy war against them. And this article says, China and the United States are careening toward an inevitable collision, Foreign Minister Qin Gang said Tuesday, a day after Chinese leader Xi Jinping made a rare direct accusation that Washington was trying to contain China, which, of course, is 100% accurate. We've only said that several times for the last 10 years, all of our politicians, that we're trying to contain China. So Xi Jinping is pointing out the obvious, but again, as it even says here, a rare direct accusation. Usually China is not that direct, but now they're saying, screw that, here's what's happening, we're going to call it out. We're no longer the small dog, we're the big dog now, and we're not going to be pushed around and bullied. The article continues, in a news conference on the sidelines of the National People's Congress, Qin, who was previously Beijing's ambassador in Washington but became foreign minister in December, deployed a range of often colorful and occasionally off-color metaphors to describe the severity of the sanctions, or the severity of tensions. He took a number of swipes at the Biden administration's stated desire to build guardrails to prevent simmering disagreements spiraling into crises, an effort he cast as being merely a way of preventing China from retaliating against criticism. If the United States does not pump the brakes and continues to go down the wrong road, no number of guardrails will be able to stop the relationship from running off-road and flipping over. And it is inevitable that we will fall into conflict and confrontation, he said at the news conference, the first time he has appeared as foreign minister at the annual meeting of China's rubber stamp parliament. I guess they call it the rubber stamp parliament, the Washington Post editorializing there. The article continues, when accusing the United States of unfair competition for sanctions imposed on Chinese companies, Qin drew a comparison to an Olympic track and field event where one party, clearly understood to be the United States, is not thinking about how to run the best time, but always trips the other party and even wants to send them to the Paralympics. That's a funny way to put it. Yes, we do that. We're not just trying to better ourselves. We're looking around saying, is there anybody else who's trying to rise up and do well? Let me kneecap that person and keep them down. And as an American, my position is this. A rising tide raises all boats. As economic prosperity and technology improves, we all can have a piece of the pie. We can do well, China can do well, Russia can do well. And this idea of having this zero-sum game is going to lead to confrontation and disaster. As long as China is not going around invading people like the U.S. does, I don't particularly care what they do. How China runs this country, its government, none of my business. Do I support a communist government? No, I don't. But is it any of my damn business? And the answer to that is no. China has a long history, much, much longer than the United States and even Europe in some ways. So for me to come to China and say, you need to have this sort of government and this sort of democracy is ridiculous. It's none of my business, and it's for the Chinese to decide what kind of country they want to live in. The article also continues to say, on Monday, Xi took the unusual step of name-checking the United States as leading a group of Western nations that are attempting to contain, encircle, and suppress China. He called it a challenge of unprecedented severity to our nation's development. And again, I can't disagree with them. We've openly stated and announced that's our policy. We had for Russia, a RAND Corporation, a think tank article about how to contain and destabilize Russia. And they said arm Ukraine and force Russia into a war. That's what's happening now. And guess what? These same think tanks, they have plans for China on how to contain China and to cripple China. So I can't say that Xi is wrong for saying this when we've explicitly admitted it. And we have, again, enough think tanks in Washington, D.C. who have said the exact same thing. And those think tanks are very prominent as far as leading U.S. policy. The article continues, while China's most powerful leader in decades often talks about the country facing changes unseen in a century that could derail its rise, it is unusual for Xi to directly call out the United States by name rather than referring to certain countries whose behavior Beijing dislikes. And again, we are seeing China change strategy, going from being vague to calling things out for what they are, because they have reached a point where they no longer can stay quiet, and they have enough power to actually stand up to the United States and make their case. So I can't blame the Chinese for doing that. And I only wish we have some politicians in Washington who would be willing to sit down with Putin, with Xi, with Modi in India, and actually have some sort of negotiation for a peaceful future for this world, because there's too many nuclear weapons in those four countries. We have enough nuclear weapons globally to destroy this planet 1,000,000 times over. And as other countries rise to challenge the United States, either we accept their place in the world, or we continue to have conflict. And with these nuclear arsenals, these conflicts can annihilate us all. And that is my concern. Well, that's it for now. Again, if you are new to this channel, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.